title, this is called Marriage, Friendship, but I'm not going to really get that far. Get more into it maybe next week. But I want us to watch this video. It's a 2-minute video.
Seriously? We got a video?
No,
It's a pretty self-explanatory. Guy is writing. It's called it's a tsunami wave. And so we'll go ahead and let's watch this. You shut the other light off on this side too, just for a minute.
Oh,
Then
sure.
turn
What
one back
happened?
on when we're done. Go ahead and play the video. It's okay.
I can't, because they're not playing it from the laptop. They're playing it from his iPad. Can't do anything for the audio. All the audio is coming out of the projector.
Yeah, there's not much audio on it anyways. But what I was going to see, do we have any open slots for mics?
No, we have everything taken. We have some auxiliary out. Well, we have one auxiliary out.
No, that's not
Everything's
going to work.
taken.
65 feet wave.
I can surf like that.
Yeah, what you do. It's too hot in there.
It's too hot. It's too cold. So we gotta do something with the audio. I don't know.
That's it. So, just turn the wind light on. Yeah, you see, watch this. This guy rides his waves, 65 feet tsunami wave. And I saw that and I thought, life, all of us can face tsunami waves in life. And I thought just to be able to survive it all. And
I'll be right back, Elliot. I gotta go turn
And for this guy, he's amazing because he writes it out. Every one of us are going to face, like I said, when I first saw it, first thing came to me is just life. There's things we face, there's things that come to us in waves, there's things that come to us just like this. It's a tsunami. I'm not saying everyone here this morning is facing a tsunami in their life, but some of you may be. But I would say most of us are facing some major things going on in our lives. Some have more than one, some have a couple of things, but there are some crises going on, no doubt, that no one even knows about. And the only way you and I make it through like this, they say, how will this guy make me? So I'm going to say one thing, and some of you will probably say, this is the only thing you remember from the sermon, even though it's not the sermon. But if you remember this, okay, it helps you, then so be it. The way you make it out of tsunamis of life is you got to write it out. You got to write it out. You can't stop the tsunami. You can't say, stop, I wish we could. Stop this wave of whatever it is. But you can't stop it. But you have to write it out. And so you write it out. But the way we write it out as people is by friendships. You won't survive. You won't survive these major crises in your life without friendship. And I am going to talk about marriage friendship in the end of this today a little bit and more next week. You will not survive without friendship, and especially marriage friendship. But even if you're not married, this will apply to you because God says, I'm your husband. So we're going to read a story about David and Jonathan.
Think I should bring it up some?
Everyone knows the story of David and Jonathan. We're going to read quite a bit. But I have to read this because it has to give you the context of what I'm trying to say. What's going on. I'm going to read. You say, okay, I understand that. But it makes sense after we read it and make some application to our life. Follow with me. The Bible, 1 Samuel, chapter 18. You can read it as I read it out loud here. It's up there on the board for you. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David and his armor, and even his sword and his bow and his belt. Chapter 19, verse 4. And then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his life in his hand and struck down the Philistine. And the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it, you rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? 1 Samuel chapter 20. And Jonathan gave his weapon to his boy and said to him, go and carry them to the city. And as soon as the boy had gone, David rose beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And he kissed one another, and they wept one another with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, because we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, between my offspring and your offspring forever. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Let me get into this. This is the one thing that will make or break people's lives. I know I spoke about it last week, but
Could you go straight to your
cover it again, maybe a little different angle. But it really does. It's something, if someone has it in their life and they really do, it will make you or it will break you. You will succeed or you will partially fail, or you will never be what you could be. You will never accomplish what you could accomplish without friendships. And for some people, it is a make or break life. I mentioned last week, and people that have no hope oftentimes have no one to talk to. In other words, they have no one to confide in. They have no one to speak to. They don't have a friend. And it really is the make it or break it element in people's lives. So point number 1, the importance of friendship. To kind of give you a little background here, Saul has brought David to his court because David had killed Goliath. But what happens to Saul is he becomes very envious of David and wants to kill David because of his success, and David's so popular. And so you study it out, you find out that he tries to kill David 6 times. 3 times, it's with spears. And so all during this time, you think about, at this moment, it is the most dangerous time in David's life because he's living in the court of the very man who wants to kill him. And the way Saul is he's living in Saul's household. Saul wants to kill him. And Saul is the first guy in the Bible, maybe not the first guy, but one of the first people in the Bible who went cray-cray. How do you know what cray-cray is? It's not crayons. So you go, I know crayons is. Yeah, it's not crayons. It's going crazy. My 4-year-old granddaughter knows what cray-cray is. She says, you just cray-cray. 4 years old. Well, why was Saul cray-cray? He was cray-cray because one day he's nice to David, and then one day he's kind and polite, and the next day he takes a spear and wants to kill him. Then that goes up, he goes down, then he's back to normal. The guy is crazy. Well, that's the environment David's trying to live in, trying to survive. So it's in that environment
that David finds himself, and really kind of like this guy, he's trying to ride out the storm. And you think about what's going on here. Saul is after him, wants to kill him, fits of rage they come and go, but David is thinking maybe this thing can work out. Somehow it can work out. Maybe Saul would just come to his senses, quit being cray-cray, and he won't try to kill me no more. He'll become my friend. Or maybe just get healed up. But none of that happens. But he's believing for maybe the best, so he stays there at this time. So that's where he's living. That's where David's at this moment. And what you see from 1 Samuel chapter 18, chapter 19 and 20, it really is some of the most dangerous, evil times in David's life up to this point. But what you see in the beginning, at the top of chapter 18, you see that David has a friendship with Jonathan. And then you see in the end of chapter 20, again, it's a terrible time in David's life, but we see again David's friendship with Jonathan. And so what you see in the beginning, there's a covenant that's made. The Bible says that in chapter 18. Jonathan makes a covenant with David in the beginning. And you fast forward to chapter 20, he renews that covenant. So you got the beginning and the end. In between both of those, you have a man in a friendship with Jonathan. But it's in between that David has all these things going on in his life. But at the end, you also have Jonathan there again, renewing the commitment, or this covenant being renewed. And they speak to each other about that. So what does this really mean? Eugene Peterson, he wrote the Message Bible. His commentator also writes stuff, and he said this. He said, in short, during this most dangerous and evil chapter in all of David's life, this deep friendship with Jonathan bracketed the evil. He said, with Jonathan, there's a bracket at the beginning, and there is a bracket at the end. That brings me to A. It's pretty simple. And what we're learning is the friendship, I put it like this, is the friendship with Jonathan literally contained the evil. And what this means, I think our application is pretty simple. It made it containable, it made it bearable, it made it survivable. In other words, David didn't drown during this time because of that relationship. I don't think he would have survived it had there not been that Jonathan in the beginning and the Jonathan in the end. And I got to live in the middle, but in between both of those, I have a friend that's going to see me through it. And you will find more than once Jonathan speaking to David, encouraging David, talking to David, would keep David going. It bracketed, it kept it, it makes it bearable. You listen, you can't survive. You can't survive the tsunamis of life unless you got someone there with you. Come on. I don't think, maybe you have. Most of us haven't had 6 attempts on our life like David did. But I would say most of us have some major concerns going on in our life, even as I preach right now, that probably people don't know about and are just as real to you. You know, life is filled with all kinds of things that go on. Simple, sometimes very, very complex. You know, what makes it really difficult is during this time, you have your friend, and you have that time, and you have your friend. But it's during that time of your life that it's very complex and very difficult. The tsunamis are hitting, is you have to live your life. You can't just check out. Decisions have to be made. And that really is, to me, is the most difficult thing that goes on. When things happen to us, it's difficult enough that the things are happening, they're coming to us, they're going to overwhelm us. That's bad enough. But in the middle of that, none of us can just check out. We got to live life in the middle of that and make decisions. Survive it all. The doctors tell me now I got bradycardia. Bradycardia means I had a heart like Tom Brady. Just kidding. Bradycardia is pretty simple. It's just when your heartbeat is below 60 pulses a minute. They say extreme athletes, that's pretty common to be in the 50s. The only problem is I'm not an extreme athlete. Mine's in the 50s. My average heart rate the last 7 days is 53 beats per minute. That's too low. Sometimes it's dipped as low as 30. If it dips as low as 30, I'm like this. Imagine being married to someone walking around like, hey. That's my wife gets. But in the middle of all that's going on here in our church and in your life, you think about it. I talked about my own family. Sometimes you just wish there's a place you just go for like 2 years. Can I just escape for when this whole thing happened to myself? Just give me some time to get out of it. Well, guess what, Carrie? You're not getting out of it. You have to live with it. I would tell you, just go away. You look at church. I'll be back in 2 years. Just give me 2 years to get refreshed, get my act together, make it through this, and I can navigate. Then I know what I'm doing, and I can work through this. But I've never done this before. So, but the reality is, you don't get that option. You've got to navigate through it. You've got to work through it. In the middle of it, you've got to function and operate, and live life, and be confident and halfway normal. So if you see me, you walk up to me, and I go, you know where I'm at. But I read an article about the human brain. Listen to this. Of the 400 bits of information per second reach our brain. 400 bits of information reach our brain each second. But only 2,000 bits are utilized to make us aware of our surroundings. According to multiple sources, the average amount of remotely conscious decisions an adult makes each day equals about 35,000 decisions. 35,000 decisions a day. Now I know why my mind's so tired. Some of you, it's like 2,000 a day. Some of you, not even registered. You tell someone, what were you thinking? They weren't. But the problems today, it seems like life has gotten more complex. It's not as easy as it was when you and I grew up. Professor of psychology at Georgetown University, director of campus counseling, he talks about what's going on in the college campuses today. He said 40 years ago, I would counsel the students, the college students, and most of the time they were just struggling with developmental issues like homesickness, relationship breakup, lack of direction in their life is very common. He said, but that's not what we see today anymore. Students today are being overwhelmed. They're cutting themselves. They're anorexic, alcoholic, bipolar, suicidal. And he just talks about rejection and fear and anxiety. And I talked about last week, depression, loneliness. He said developmental problems have not gone away. They've just been masked by more pressing turmoil. And so you think about that. That's the world we live in today. And another article talked about the college universities. 10 to 22% of all the students are in counseling at any given time. They're troubled. In some of the smaller colleges, as much as 50% of the students are in counseling because they're so troubled in their life. You know what, church? When we grew up, we really did have a lot easier than our kids growing up today in this world. This world is crazy. And they got to live up, they got to grow up in it. Simple days of playing kick the can, that ain't happening. You don't want your kids to go out by themselves anymore. It's so crazy today. People are afraid, they're breaking down, they're making decisions. I think even now, probably the biggest fear people have is who's going to be next president. Oh, Lord. This man, recently, October 25th, I believe it was, John Spinken was holding his boys ages 1 and 3 years old. He jumped from a bridge on Interstate 287. He was pronounced dead at the scene. His boys were found nearby. When the officers found the children conscious and alert, it was nothing short of a miracle. They went on to say they believed that the trees, the pine trees, probably caught the children and they cushioned the fall. But what got my attention was this same man appeared on social media as the happiest man there was. He had posted something earlier before on social media when he thought he maybe lost a son. He said, the article says, the actions appear a far cry from the smiling man who he was on social media. He called fatherhood the best feeling of the world and described the panic that when relief was washed over him the moments after a health scare threatened the life of his youngest son. He says, quote, you see, we all have good days and bad days. At the end of the day, we're breathing. Don't take life for granted. You never know when you take your last breath. What does he do? He takes his 1-year-old and jumps off a 100-foot bridge. They saw this guy John on social media smiling fatherhood, and yet he was so desperate inwardly that no one even saw it. He was so lost inwardly, so broken inwardly, so the tsunamis of his emotions, just things coming over him, way overwhelmed him to take his son to just jump. You think about fellowship, not just fellowship, friendships. You've heard me talk about it on Thursday nights. They say people that have friends will have better health. The more friends, close friends you have, the better health you'll probably have. You got some close friends, not just have better health. If you have, so I don't have no close friends, even if you have 1 or 2, that's significant, believe it or not. Then you will live longer than someone who's alone. Someone who has no one will die early. Interesting. It's the power of friendship. But let me get to this point. Especially if you're married. Put this up. I can tell as a married person, it's the friendship in your marriage that will get you through the hard times. And again, I say this, you say, well, I'm not married, Pastor. Isaiah 54, verse 5, for your Maker is your husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. He's called the God of the whole earth. There is absolutely no way humanly possible. Honestly, I believe this with my heart. That's why I'm saying it. That things I've gone through the last 3 or 4 years, there's no way on planet Earth if I would never made it without my wife. But you know what's amazing? And I'm not trying to be funny, but friendship factor, how men see it and how women see it, it's like 2 different worlds. A guy will say, again, my wife is my best friend. My wife will say, how can I be your best friend? You never talk to me. But to the guy, he is. Guys don't talk like girls. Guys ain't girls. Well, some guys maybe are, I don't know. But guys are not girls, and guys don't talk the way they say. They just don't do that. It's just 2 different worlds. They see it 2 different, complete different ways. You know, thank God for being romantic. Thank God for when you first get married and all that stuff. That's fine. All that stuff goes. But let me tell you something about friendship. Friendship is what gets you through hard times. It won't be those hickeys. Big city. And all that lovey-dovey. That's all, you know, it's all great stuff. But the truth is, it's friendship. You have a friend. Because you'll see next week when I talk about as life goes on, guess what? A lot of things are not there no more. But at the end of life, what do you have? You have a friend. Amen. You have someone who loves you and you love. Friendship. So it's your friendship with God that carries you through life's tsunamis if you're single. It really is. Without, God says, I'm your husband. And you know, he says that even to the married people. They have a San Diego Zoo, not San, SeaWorld. Sometimes people go to SeaWorld, and I tell them, you can go see shampoo? And some people go, yeah. It's not shampoo, it's shamu. So this lady, she's become very frustrated with her husband. And she writes an article, it was titled, it got my attention because I saw the title, I like this. What Shamu taught me about my husband. Listen to this. She expresses obviously frustration over her husband's irritating habits. I can't imagine a husband having irritating habits. I can't even imagine. Where would you? They're not. They don't exist, right, wife? It's not a few. It's how many thousands do they have? She says these minor annoyances are not the stuff of separation and divorce, but in some they begin to dull my love for Scott. I needed to nudge him a little closer to perfect, to make him to the mate who might not annoy me so much, who wouldn't keep me waiting at restaurants, a mate who would be easier to love. So, like many wives before me, I ignored a library of advice and books. I set about to make him perfect, improve him. How else? By nagging. By nagging, of course, which only made his behavior worse. Instead of driving faster, he'd drive faster instead of slower, shave less frequently, not more, leave his reeking bike garb on the bedroom floor longer than ever. A breakthrough came when I traveled to go see some exotic animals in California to do a research paper. She went to go see. She heard these and she went there. As I listened to these exotic animal trainers, I listened. These are professional trainers, explained how they taught dolphins to flip, elephants to paint. Eventually it hit me. The same techniques might work on that stubborn but lovable species called the American husband. She said, the central lesson I learned from these exotic animal trainers is that I should reward behavior I like and ignore behavior I don't. After all, you don't get a sea lion to balance a ball on the end of its nose by nagging. The same goes for the American husband back in Maine. I began thanking Scott. If you threw one dirty shirt in the hamper, if you threw in two, I'd actually give him a kiss. Meanwhile, I'd step over his soiled clothes on the floor without one sharp word, and though sometimes I did kick them underneath the bed. But he began to bask in my appreciation, and the piles became smaller and smaller. 1 Peter 4:8 says, and above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. Another translation, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of clothes. I want you to bow your heads. It was way too long to preach the whole message, one service. But let me go back to what I said at the beginning. You survive the tsunamis of life. You have to. The only way you can survive them is you got to write them out. There's people here this morning that it's exactly where you're at. You are facing the tsunami. See, Pastor, how do I survive this? You have to write it out. But the one way we write it out is by relationships, by friendships. Not saying it's easy, but you can't survive. I don't know what's beneath the surface of your life this morning. I don't know what troubling your soul. But God knows. God knows you better than you know you. And He's here to help you. But He can only help you, and He can only help me if I'm willing to let Him. There's people here this morning, you're trying to fix every problem you have. I think it's about time you say, okay, God, I get your message. I'm giving it to you to help me and my wife. Some of you are in a marriage tsunami that no one even knows about. Relationship, or maybe like all the things these people are facing today. There's depression, there's loneliness, there's heartache, there's just hopeless. There's a God in heaven who wants to help us. And He's here to help us this morning. Some of us, truthfully, we desperately need to change. We can't walk out the same way we walked in. And you heard in the Sunday school, if you were here, it's not because we just can change ourselves, say, okay, I'm changing. No. The Spirit of God convicts us. The Spirit of God helps us. The Spirit of God gets inside of us. The Spirit of God breaks us, causes us to surrender to God, and we let God finally, we say yes to God finally. He fills us, and He gives us strength that we don't have. You're here this morning, you're a Christian, you say, you know what, Pastor, there's things that are troubling my soul. Why is it we hide these things from God? 50% of some of the colleges, the kids are being counseled. They said life's too difficult, it's too hard. You're here this morning, so you know what, God, you're talking to me. Raise your hand right now. Yes, yes, God's talking to you. Raise your hand. Yes, yes, I see all these hands. You're going to live your life your own way with your own strength and do what you're going to do. You're going to wake up one day, if you're not there already, you wake up empty, lost. Some of you are trying to fix things you realize you can't fix. But I tell you what you can do, you can give it to God. And say, you know what, God, I'm going to give it to you this morning at this altar. I'm going to give my wife to you. I'm going to give my husband to you. I'm going to give my, whatever it is, I'm going to give my children to you. Some of you children say, God, I give you my life. God, I'm overwhelmed. Help me. And He will. That's you, raise your hand. Yes, yes. What will it take? Yes, I see all these hands. What will it take for you to say yes to God? More brokenness, more pain, more tears. Listen to me, brother and sister, it doesn't have to be. Maybe you're here this morning, maybe you're not even saved. You want to get saved this morning. Would you raise your hand before I close? Say, I'm not right with God, Pastor. I want to get right. Here's my hand. If that's you, raise your hand. Say, I'm not right with God. I know that. Here's my hand. Maybe you'll rededicate your life. Would you raise your hand? Okay, many hands are raised. Just listen to me. This morning we come to the altar. A lot of people raise their hands. Well, there's a big God in heaven who's going to help us all. Listen, there's some here, you're thinking you're all alone. You are not all alone. You feel all alone in your home. You feel all alone in your marriage. You are not alone. God said, I'm your husband. Even in marriage, it says that to us. We're going to stand in a moment. I want everyone who raised their hands to find a place to pray. Please, let's all stand. These altars are open. Just come, fill the altars. God, this morning we pour our hearts out to you. God, you made us. You know us better than we know ourselves. And I ask you, Jesus, just to pour out your Spirit on our lives at this altar. Help us. Help your people. I ask you to begin to heal marriages, heal hearts, change lives. Take our burdens, Father. We're asking you for your grace and your power. You said, come unto me. All you that labor and heavy laden, I'll give you rest. God, give these people, give us rest for our souls this morning. Take it out of our hands, God, and give it to you. It's yours. It's yours. My marriage, my family, my wife, my kids, they're yours. I won't live this way anymore. God, you've got to help me. And you will. Let's sing a song of worship while you pray. You are my